They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine with surgical precision, watching each member of my family crumble exactly as they deserved. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how the girl who couldn't breathe learned to suffocate her enemies. The dining room chandelier cast warm shadows across the mahogany table that evening, creating an illusion of family warmth that couldn't have been further from the truth. I sat at my usual spot, the chair closest to the kitchen door, watching my parents and younger sister Chloe enjoy their meal. The roasted chicken smelled divine, but my throat was beginning to tighten in that familiar, terrifying way. I reached for my water glass, trying to suppress the cough building in my chest. It came anyway, a small, dry sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. My father Richard's fork clattered against his plate, his steel-gray eyes fixed on me with that expression I knew so well, contempt mixed with irritation. What now, Maya? Playing sick again? Nobody wants to hear your wheezing at the dinner table. I tried to speak, to explain that this was real, that my asthma was acting up, but my mother Eleanor cut me off with a delicate wave of her manicured hand. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her designer shoe. Honestly, darling, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, can't you control yourself? We're trying to have a civilized meal. Chloe, my 16-year-old sister, smirked from across the table. Her perfectly curled blonde hair bounced as she leaned forward. Maybe you should wear a mask, sis. Don't ruin our appetites with your dramatic breathing exercises. I forced myself to take another bite of food, even though my chest was tightening more with each passing second. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, but I knew better than to make a scene. I'd learned over my 18 years in this house that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. After dinner, I excused myself quietly and slipped out of the house. The evening air should have helped, but instead, as I walked through Riverside Park, just 3 blocks from our colonial-style home in the heart of Greenwich, Connecticut, the attack hit me like a freight train. One moment I was breathing, albeit with difficulty. The next, my airways constricted so violently that I stumbled and fell to my knees on the paved path. Panic flooded through me as I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. The world was tilting, darkening at the edges. I could hear my own desperate gasps, the awful sound of someone drowning on dry land. I managed to dial my mother's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the tinkling of glasses and laughter in the background. Mom, I choked out, each word a monumental effort. Can't breathe. Park. Please. There was a pause. Then Eleanor's voice came through, cold and crystalline clear. Maya, I'm at the Fairfield Country Club Charity Gala. This is incredibly important for my standing in the community. Handle it yourself. And for God's sake, don't embarrass me by having paramedics show up and asking questions. I don't need people knowing I have a daughter this weak and pathetic. The line went dead. I don't remember much of the crawl back home. Just the burning in my lungs, the taste of copper in my mouth, the way the sidewalk scraped my palms as I dragged myself forward. Every breath was a battle I was losing. When I finally reached our front door, I used the last of my strength to pull myself up and stumble inside. The television was blaring from the living room. My father was there, stretched out in his leather recliner, watching some financial news program. Dad? I gasped, leaning against the doorframe. Please, can't breathe, need help. Richard glanced at me over the top of his reading glasses. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression, maybe concern. But then his face hardened into that familiar mask of disdain. More theatrics, Maya? He turned back to the television and actually increased the volume. You always were the queen of playing victim. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet for once. I'm not falling for this act. I slid down the wall, my vision swimming. Chloe's room was just down the hall. Maybe she would help. Maybe blood would mean something. I crawled to her door and knocked, or rather, fell against it. The door opened, and Chloe stood there in her cheerleading practice outfit, phone in hand, probably texting her popular friends. She looked down at me, sprawled on the floor, gasping for air like a fish out of water. Instead of alarm, I saw only annoyance cross her face. Oh my God, are you seriously doing this right now? She rolled her eyes. Let me guess, you want attention? You want me to drop everything and take care of you? She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. This is so typical of you, Maya. Always the drama queen. The door slammed in my face. I don't know how long I lay there. Time became meaningless, measured only in the desperate struggle for each breath. The world was fading to black when I heard a voice, distant and concerned. Miss, can you hear me? I woke up in Greenwich Hospital, fluorescent lights burning my eyes. A kind-faced nurse named Sarah was adjusting my IV. She explained that she'd been driving past our street, saw me lying motionless near the front door through the window, and called 911. Your family, she said hesitantly. We called the numbers you had in your phone. No one answered. Of course they didn't. As I lay in that hospital bed, breathing through an oxygen mask, something fundamental shifted inside me. The fear was still there, the hurt was still fresh, but underneath it all, a new feeling was emerging. Cold, hard, unforgiving. Rage. They had left me to die. My own family had looked at me struggling for life and turned away. In that moment, staring at the white ceiling tiles of a hospital room, completely alone, I made a decision that would change everything. They would pay. Each one of them would know what it felt like to suffocate, to struggle, to beg for mercy and find none. I spent 3 days in the hospital. 3 days of silence from my family except for one text from Eleanor asking when I'd be home because she needed me to pick up her dry cleaning. 3 days to think, to plan, to let the anger crystallize into something sharp and purposeful. When I was discharged, I took a taxi home. The house was empty when I arrived. I went straight to my room and locked the door, pulling out my laptop. If my family had taught me anything, it was that appearances could be deceiving and that the right information, applied correctly, could destroy anyone. I started searching online, looking for resources, for help, for anything that could give me an edge. That's when I found the Asthma Support Group forum. But more importantly, that's where I found a post from someone calling themselves Detective Retired, offering advice to people dealing with difficult family situations. I sent a private message, not expecting much. But within an hour, I received a response that would change everything. The message was from a man named Harold Johnson. He explained that he'd been a private investigator before retiring and that he'd seen my grandmother's name, Margaret Anderson, in my profile. He'd been her friend, had worked a case for her years ago. He was sorry to hear she'd passed and wanted to know how her granddaughter was doing. I poured everything out in my response. The abuse, the neglect, the near-death experience. And then I asked him something that surprised even me. Could he help me make them pay? His response came the next morning. 3 words that lit a fire in my chest. Let's start planning. We met in secret at a small coffee shop in Stamford, far enough from Greenwich that no one would recognize me. Harold Johnson was in his late 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a gentle voice that put me at ease. He listened to my story without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. Your grandmother would be heartbroken, he said finally. She loved you so much, Maya. She'd want you safe and happy. Then help me, I said. Help me show them what they really are. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. I'll help you. But we do this smart, we do this clean, and we make sure you come out of this stronger than ever. Over the next few weeks, Harold taught me things I'd never imagined knowing: how to observe without being noticed, how to gather information, how to exploit weaknesses. But most importantly, he helped me understand my enemies. Your mother, Eleanor, he said one afternoon, showing me photos he'd taken of her at various social events. She's built her entire identity on being admired, being envied. Her reputation is everything to her. That's her weak point. We documented everything about Eleanor, her routine, her friends, her obsessions. The woman was a peacock, all display and no substance. She spent thousands on designer clothes, exclusive perfumes, and maintaining her position in Greenwich's social elite. Her Instagram was a carefully curated shrine to her supposed perfection. Your father, Richard, Harold continued, pulling up another file. Real estate mogul, or so he presents himself. But I've been digging into his business dealings. The man cuts corners, makes deals that are questionable at best. He's got properties tied up in LLCs that don't quite add up. If someone were to look closer, they'd find some very interesting irregularities. Richard's weakness was his greed and his pride. He loved being seen as the smartest person in the room, the deal maker, the man who always came out on top. He was also arrogant enough to believe he was untouchable. And Chloe, Harold said, his voice softening slightly, she's young, but she's learned cruelty from the best. Popular at Riverside Academy, star of the drama club, social media influencer in training, but underneath all that confidence, there's insecurity. She's terrified of being exposed as anything less than perfect. My sister's entire life revolved around her image. She had thousands of followers on TikTok and Instagram, all admiring her seemingly perfect life. But Harold and I both knew that facades that perfect were always hiding something ugly underneath. While Harold gathered intelligence, I focused on transforming myself. I found a doctor who actually listened to me, who helped me get my asthma under better control with a new treatment plan. I started exercising gently, building my strength and stamina. I changed my diet, focusing on foods that reduced inflammation. But the biggest change was mental. I stopped letting their words touch me. When Eleanor made snide comments about my appearance, I smiled and said nothing. When Richard dismissed my existence, I used the opportunity to move through the house unseen, gathering information. When Chloe mocked me, I recorded every word on the small device Harold had given me. I became a ghost in my own home, invisible and observant. And what I observed gave me everything I needed. 3 months after that night in the hospital, I was ready to begin. Eleanor's downfall started with her most prized possession, her perfume collection. She had dozens of bottles, but there was one she treasured above all others, a limited edition Clive Christian scent that cost over $4,000. She wore it exclusively to her most important events, believing it was her signature, the scent that made her unforgettable. Harold helped me source an identical bottle and had it filled with a custom mixture, a perfume that smelled pleasant at first but developed into something increasingly unpleasant as it reacted with skin chemistry. It wouldn't harm anyone, but it would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The switch was easy. Eleanor was so confident in her locked vanity that she never considered someone might have the key, the same key my grandmother had given me years ago, telling me to keep my important things safe. The next major event on Eleanor's calendar was the annual Greenwich Charity Gala, an event she'd spent months planning and using as a vehicle to climb even higher in the social hierarchy. She'd been bragging about it for weeks, about how she'd secured the venue, how she'd be wearing her new Valentino gown, how everyone who mattered would be there. The night of the gala, I watched from my bedroom window as she got ready, saw her reach for that special bottle of perfume and apply it liberally. She looked radiant as she left, Richard beside her in his tuxedo, both of them the picture of Greenwich elite. I didn't attend, of course. I was never invited to these things. Instead, I waited. The first text came from Harold around 9 p.m. She's getting looks. People are moving away from her. By 10 p.m., she's starting to notice, keeps checking her dress, thinks maybe she stepped in something. By 11 p.m., complete social disaster. She's practically alone. Even Richard has distanced himself. I imagined it perfectly. Eleanor standing there in her expensive gown, confused and humiliated as her carefully constructed social circle literally turned their backs on her. The scent that was supposed to make her unforgettable was doing exactly that, just not in the way she'd intended. But that was just the opening move. Harold had arranged for an influential beauty blogger, someone with 500,000 followers who covered luxury lifestyle topics, to attend the gala. This blogger, Melissa Chen, had been briefed on what to look for. Her post went live the next morning. Attended the Greenwich Charity Gala last night and was shocked to discover local socialite Eleanor Anderson wearing what can only be described as a knockoff perfume. The scent was distinctly off-brand and quite unpleasant. It's disappointing to see someone in her position cutting corners on quality. Perhaps the rumors about financial troubles are true? The post included photos of Eleanor looking increasingly distressed as the evening progressed. Comments flooded in, ranging from sympathy to schadenfreude to outright mockery. Eleanor's phone started ringing off the hook. I heard her from my room, her voice rising in pitch as she tried to defend herself, to explain that it must have been a mistake, that she only wore authentic luxury perfumes. But the damage was done. Her exclusive book club uninvited her. The country club put her membership under review. Invitations to upcoming events were mysteriously rescinded. In Greenwich's social circles, perception was reality, and Eleanor had been perceived as a fraud. I watched her unraveling over the next few days. She barely left her room, paranoid that everyone was talking about her, which they absolutely were. Her Instagram posts were met with laughing emojis and comments asking about her budget fragrance choices. The woman who had built her entire identity on being envied was now an object of pity and ridicule. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Richard's empire was built on smoke and mirrors, and Harold had given me the matches to burn it down. We'd spent weeks documenting his shady business practices, following paper trails that led to offshore accounts and properties bought through shell companies to avoid taxes. The evidence was damning. Properties listed at one value for tax purposes and another for loan purposes. Kickbacks from contractors. Deals made with partners who had criminal records. Nothing violent, but plenty illegal enough to destroy his reputation and potentially land him in legal trouble. I could have gone to the authorities directly, but where was the poetry in that? Instead, Harold helped me arrange a meeting with Marcus Webb, Richard's biggest rival in the Connecticut real estate market and a man known for playing hardball. We sent Marcus everything we had, anonymously at first, just enough to pique his interest. Then Harold, using his old connections, arranged a face-to-face meeting where I, disguised and using a voice modulator, presented the full extent of Richard's corruption. Marcus's smile was predatory. "This is quite the gift. What do you want in return?" "Just watch him fall," I said through the modulator. "That's payment enough." Marcus went to work with the efficiency of a man who'd been waiting years for this opportunity. He didn't just leak the information, he weaponized it. Strategic releases to the press. Anonymous tips to regulatory boards. Carefully timed revelations that kept Richard constantly on the defensive. The Greenwich Times ran a series of investigative pieces titled "The House That Richard Built, A Foundation of Fraud." Each article revealed new details, new schemes, new victims of Richard's business practices. I watched my father's confident facade crumble in real time. His phone calls became more frantic. He started drinking earlier in the day. Clients canceled contracts, partners demanded audits. The man who had looked at me gasping for air and turned up the television was now the one suffocating under scrutiny. The best part was watching him look for someone to blame. He suspected competitors, disgruntled employees, even Eleanor at one point. It never occurred to him that his dying daughter might have been paying attention all those years, might have learned something from watching him operate. But the piece of resistance was still to come. Chloe's perfect little world was about to shatter, and unlike her parents, she'd have no one to blame but herself. My sister had built her high school kingdom on a foundation of cruelty disguised as charisma. She was popular because people feared her, because crossing Chloe Anderson meant social suicide at Riverside Academy, but Harold and I had been documenting the real Chloe for months. The recordings were damning. Chloe mocking a classmate's wait until the girl cried. Chloe orchestrating the social isolation of a scholarship student because she wore the wrong brands. Chloe laughing with her friends about how they'd spread a false rumor that destroyed another girl's reputation. And perhaps most tellingly, Chloe's vicious comments about our teachers, calling them incompetent, making sexual jokes about them, showing absolute contempt for anyone she considered beneath her. The spring production of The Importance of Being Earnest was Chloe's crowning achievement. She'd landed the lead role of Gwendolyn through a combination of genuine talent and social manipulation. The opening night was being treated like a red carpet event, with local media coverage, influential parents in attendance, and even a scout from a prestigious drama program at Yale. Harold and I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. We'd gained access to the auditorium sound system through a student tech volunteer who Chloe had bullied mercilessly and who was more than happy to help once we explained what we had planned. Opening night arrived. The auditorium was packed. Chloe was backstage, no doubt running through her lines, preparing to bask in the adoration she believed was her birthright. The house lights dimmed. The audience settled into anticipatory silence, and then, instead of the opening music, a voice filled the auditorium. Chloe's voice. God, Mrs. Peterson is such a pathetic cow. Can you believe she thinks she can teach English when she can barely string together a sentence herself? Gasps rippled through the audience. I'd positioned myself in the back, wanting to see every face, every reaction. Another clip played. That scholarship girl. What's her name, Emma? We need to make sure everyone knows she doesn't belong here. Maybe start a rumor about her stealing or something. The audience was in an uproar now. I could see Mrs. Peterson in the third row, her face pale. I could see Emma's parents looking horrified. But the recordings kept coming, each one more damning than the last. Chloe's voice, crystal clear and unmistakable, revealing the monster behind the smile. The curtain went up on schedule. Chloe stood there, frozen in the spotlight, her face a mask of horror as she realized what was happening. She tried to speak, to deliver her first line, but the words wouldn't come. The confident actress had been struck mute by the weight of her own cruelty, played back for the world to hear. She stumbled through the first scene, forgetting lines, missing cues. Her co-stars tried to cover for her, but it was hopeless. The damage was done. By intermission, half the audience had left. By the final act, Chloe had fled the stage in tears. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The video clips went viral within hours, posted anonymously to every social media platform. Chloe's followers turned on her like sharks smelling blood. The hate comments, the mockery, the absolute destruction of her social standing happened in real time. Riverside Academy launched an investigation. Several students came forward with their own stories of bullying, empowered by the exposure of Chloe's true nature. The girl who had wielded social power like a weapon found herself completely isolated, her former friends scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. Yale's drama program, unsurprisingly, retracted their interest. I watched all three of them implode, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a cold certainty that this was justice. They had tried to break me, to make me feel worthless, to literally let me die. Now they knew how it felt to have everything taken away. But I wasn't finished. There was one final move to make, one that would ensure they understood the full scope of what they'd lost. Through Harold's contacts, I'd learned something interesting about our family home, the beautiful colonial on Elm Street that Eleanor was so proud of. Richard had taken out a second mortgage on it 6 months ago, using the money to cover some of his failing business ventures. He'd forged Eleanor's signature on the documents, something that would have legal consequences, but more importantly, he was behind on payments. The bank was preparing to foreclose, but Harold and I had a better idea. Using money from my grandmother's trust, the one thing my parents couldn't touch because it was in my name alone, I'd been building a small investment portfolio with Harold's guidance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to buy Richard's debt from the bank at a discount, enough to become the legal owner of the mortgage on our family home. I timed the revelation perfectly. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 months after the gala, 2 months after Richard's business had collapsed, 1 month after Chloe's social exile. The family was gathered in the living room, a shadow of what they'd once been. Eleanor had aged years in months, her carefully maintained appearance cracking. Richard was on his third scotch of the evening, his empire in ruins, his reputation destroyed. Chloe sat curled in a chair, phone dark for once, her social media accounts deleted after the relentless harassment. I walked in, wearing a simple but elegant dress I'd bought for the occasion, my hair done, my breathing steady and strong. I'd never looked more like my grandmother. Richard barely glanced at me. "What do you want, Maya?" I set my briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out a folder. I want you to understand something. Understand what? Eleanor's voice was listless, the fight gone out of her. That actions have consequences. I handed the folder to Richard. This house, the one you're sitting in, the one Mom is so proud of, the one you thought you were so clever using as collateral, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Richard opened the folder, his face going from pale to red as he read the documents. This can't be legal. This is fraud. Actually, it's completely legal. I said calmly. You defaulted on your mortgage. The bank sold the debt. I bought it. I now own this house. And as of this moment, you're all trespassing. Eleanor snatched the papers from Richard's hands, her eyes scanning desperately. No, this is our home. You can't do this. Can't I? I looked at her, really looked at her, and let her see the steel in my eyes that used to hold tears. You told me I didn't deserve a home when you left me dying in the park. Dad told me to stand on my own feet when I was suffocating on our living room floor. Chloe slammed the door in my face when I was begging for help. So I did. I stood up. I learned to breathe. And I learned exactly who you all really are. Chloe was crying now, real tears, not the performative ones she used to manipulate people. Maya, please. I'm sorry. We're sorry. Are you? I asked. Are you sorry for what you did, or are you sorry that you're facing consequences? Silence. That's what I thought. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved. Yes, I need to report trespassers at my property. Elm Street. The Anderson residence. Yes, I'm the owner. They're refusing to leave. Richard stood up so fast his chair tipped over. You vindictive little bitch. I learned from the best, I said, meeting his rage with icy calm. The police arrived within 15 minutes. I showed them my documentation, proved my ownership, and watched as they explained to my former family that they had no legal right to be there. Eleanor broke down completely. Please, Maya, please, we have nowhere to go. I remembered being on my knees in that park, phone in my trembling hand, begging her for help. I remembered her words, handle it yourself. You'll figure it out, I said. You're all so capable, so superior. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. I watched them pack what they could carry, watched the police escort them out, watched them stand on the sidewalk looking lost and broken. Richard was making angry calls that no one was answering. Eleanor was crying, her perfect makeup running down her face. Chloe just stood there, the girl who'd had everything now holding a single suitcase. I stood in the doorway of what was now my house, breathing deeply and easily, feeling my lungs expand fully for the first time in years. You took my breath away. I called out to them. All of you, every day, in every way. You made me feel like I was suffocating in my own life. Now you know how that feels. I closed the door. The next morning, I met Harold at our usual coffee shop. He looked at me with something like concern. How are you feeling? Free, I said, and I meant it. What's next for you? He asked. I'd been thinking about that. The house was already listed with a realtor, and I'd received several strong offers. Connecticut held too many bad memories. It was time for a fresh start. I'm thinking California, I said. Berkeley, maybe. I got accepted into their pre-med program. Harold's face lit up. Your grandmother would have loved that. She always said you were the smart one. There's something I need to do first, I said. The money from the house, after I pay you back for everything you've invested. Maya, I don't want to be paid back. This was for Margaret, and for you. I know, that's why I'm donating most of it. There's a foundation for asthma research, and another one that helps kids in abusive home situations. They need it more than I do. Grandma's trust is enough to get me through school. I spent the next 2 weeks tying up loose ends. I sold the house to a young family with 2 kids who were thrilled to get it below market value. I donated the majority of the proceeds as planned, keeping only what I needed for my new start. I said goodbye to Harold, the man who'd helped me find my strength when I had none. Before I left Greenwich, I did one final thing. I went to the cemetery where my grandmother was buried and stood before her headstone. I hope I made you proud, Grandma, I whispered. I hope you understand why I had to do it. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could almost hear her voice telling me that strength isn't about being the loudest or the cruelest. It's about surviving, learning, and refusing to let the world make you small. I drove away from Greenwich on a bright morning in late August, my car packed with everything that mattered to me. The town grew smaller in my rearview mirror, and with it, the girl I used to be. California was everything Connecticut wasn't. Warm, open, full of possibility. I found an apartment near campus, started my classes, and discovered something revolutionary. I could breathe here. Really breathe. The air was clear, both literally and metaphorically. I made friends, real friends, people who valued kindness and authenticity. I joined the pre-med society and discovered I had a particular interest in pulmonology, maybe unsurprisingly. Helping others breathe became my calling. Sometimes I wonder what happened to them. I heard through the grapevine that Richard moved to New Jersey, taking a job as a sales associate at a real estate firm, a humiliating demotion from his former status. Eleanor reportedly lives with her sister in Hartford, working as a receptionist at a dental office. Chloe finished high school quietly, attended community college. All her dreams of drama school and social media stardom evaporated. I feel nothing when I think of them now. Not hate, not satisfaction, not even pity. They're just people who made choices, and those choices had consequences. On my 21st birthday, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from Chloe, pages of apologies and explanations, asking if we could talk, if I could forgive. I read it once, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond, maybe not. The truth was, I didn't need their apologies or their forgiveness. I didn't need anything from them at all. I had built a new life, one where I was valued, where my worth wasn't determined by others' cruelty, where I could breathe freely. That was revenge enough. Standing on the Berkeley campus, surrounded by people who saw me as Maya, the determined pre-med student, the reliable study partner, the friend who always had your back, I realized something profound. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's becoming so completely yourself, so genuinely happy, that their opinions cease to matter entirely. I breathe deeply now, filling my lungs with California air, feeling strong and alive. The girl who once couldn't catch her breath has become a woman who takes each one with intention and gratitude. They tried to suffocate me. Instead, they taught me how to fly. Years have passed since I left Connecticut, and I'm in my final year of medical school now, specializing in pulmonary medicine. I work with patients who struggle to breathe, who understand that panic of airways closing, lungs failing. I help them not just medically, but emotionally, because I've been where they are. Last week, I received another letter, this time from Richard, also forwarded from the old address. Unlike Chloe's emotional plea, his was brief and businesslike. He wanted money. His health was failing, he wrote, and he needed help with medical bills. He had the audacity to invoke family duty, to remind me that blood should mean something. I laughed when I read it. Not cruel laughter, just the honest amusement of someone who'd moved so far beyond the reach of manipulation that it seemed almost quaint. I didn't respond. That evening, I video called Harold. He was fully retired now, spending his days in Florida with his wife, fishing and apparently taking up watercolor painting. Got a letter from Richard today, I told him. His eyebrows rose. Oh, let me guess. Wanted money for medical bills. Harold shook his head. Some people never learn. What did you tell him? Nothing. There's nothing to say. He made his choices. Your grandmother would be proud of you, Maya. Not for the revenge, although between you and me, watching that unfold was quite satisfying. But for who you've become after. That's the real victory. He was right. The revenge had been necessary, cathartic even, but it wasn't what defined me. What defined me was the choice I made after, to heal, to grow, to use my pain as fuel for something better. I think about that night in the hospital sometimes, lying there alone, making the decision to fight back. Part of me wishes I could go back and tell that scared girl that everything would be okay, that she was stronger than she knew. But another part of me knows that she had to walk through that fire to become who I am now. My phone buzzes with a text from Sarah, the nurse who saved my life that night. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and she'd become something of a mentor to me. She's working at Greenwich Hospital still, dedicating her life to being there for patients when their families won't be. Dinner next week when you're in town for your rotation? I smile and text back confirmation. I have a rotation scheduled at Yale New Haven Hospital, close enough to Greenwich that I could visit if I wanted to. I won't go back to that house, of course. A different family lives there now, hopefully filling it with love instead of toxicity. But I'll see Sarah and Harold if he flies up, and maybe visit Grandma's grave again. Sometimes I wonder if what I did makes me like them. If using their weaknesses against them, orchestrating their downfall, makes me cruel too. But then I remember the distinction that Harold helped me understand. They hurt people because it made them feel powerful. I stopped them because they were hurting people. There's a difference between justice and cruelty, even when they can look similar from the outside. I'm dating someone now, a fellow medical student named Alex who makes me laugh and holds my hand when I wake up from the occasional nightmare about not being able to breathe. I told them everything about my past, about what I did, worried they'd see me differently. You survived, Alex said simply. You survived and you made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else the same way. That's not something to be ashamed of. In a few months, I'll graduate. I've already accepted a fellowship at UCSF, working specifically with asthma patients from low-income families. Kids who might not have advocates, who might not have families that understand or care. I'll be there for them in ways no one was there for me. That's my real revenge, I suppose. Not the destruction of 3 people who deserved it, but the salvation of countless others who don't deserve to suffer. Tonight, I'm sitting on my apartment balcony, watching the sun set over the bay. My lungs are clear, my breathing steady and strong. I've learned to control my asthma through proper medication, lifestyle changes, and the kind of medical care everyone deserves but not everyone receives. I think about Maya at 18, gasping for air on a living room floor, being told to stop being dramatic. I think about Maya at 21, watching her family lose everything they valued because they'd valued all the wrong things. And I look at Maya at 26, about to become Dr. Anderson, ready to spend her life helping others breathe freely. The journey from victim to survivor to thriver has been long and painful and absolutely worth it. I take a deep breath, feeling it fill every corner of my lungs, feeling strong and alive and free. They thought they could suffocate me, could break me, could make me disappear. Instead, I learned to breathe fire. And that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all. Not their destruction, but my resurrection. Not their fall, but my rise. Not their pain, but my peace. I am alive. I am strong. I am free. And I can finally, beautifully, breathe.